Hi everybody, it's Franny and we're back with our 3.2 Carrera project. We're pretty darn close. In the last couple of episodes we got the engine started and then we got the car out for a drive, but I'm not really happy with the way it's running. The idle is too high, it feels a little rough. I don't know, there's something that's just not quite right. So in this episode what I want to do is go through all the bits in here, do some diagnosis on it and see if we can figure out what's off, because with all this work I want this thing to run perfectly. Alright, well our first step is actually going to be to go down and get some gas, and also we need to warm up the car. We can't do our diagnostics until the car is pretty warm. So let's go ahead and lower the car all the way down and go out for a little drive. That's good. Oil pressure just came up. It really sounds to me like we've lost a cylinder, so I got to figure out why that is. Our idle is too high, so we got a few things to check out today. So we'll get back to the garage, take a look back there, and run through some diagnostics and see what we can find. Well, I'm back from our run. I'm going to go ahead and start the car back up again, and we're going to test a few different bits inside here and see what's causing this problem. The idle on the car is too high, and you can hear it's kind of moving around a little bit as well. First thing I want to check is the idle position micro switch. Now it's up underneath here, and every time we come off the throttle, it turns off, and then every time you let go of the throttle, it engages. The connection for it is right here, and I'm going to pull this. Now when I pull this, if there's something wrong with that idle stop switch, then nothing will happen. But if I pull this and the idle increases, then I know my idle stop switch is working properly. So let's go ahead and pull it and see what we get. Alright, well our idle went really high. So that's an indication that our switch is actually working. Let me go ahead and plug it back in. Alright, well it's not that. Let me disconnect the air bypass valve here and see if that makes any difference. Well that's interesting, no change at all, huh? I've turned the engine back to the run position and we should feel this vibrating, and I do. Very slightly, but I feel it vibrating. Pull the switch out, no vibration, put it back in, there we go, vibrating. Alright, there's another thing we can check. When the engine is good and warm, if we disconnect this and take a look at it, we should see the cross valve in it about halfway open. So let's go ahead and pull it off really quick like bunny and see what it looks like. Alright, and let's see, what do we see? You can hear it buzzing back there. Kind of see it moving a little bit. I can hear it flinching. Flinch, flinch. Alright, pull this off. The mechanism is good and loose. Now this is the original one. So I bought a replacement, and the replacement, the car was surging and surging. I put this guy back on, it stopped surging. So I'm pretty certain this part is good. At least it was. Let's check it out again. See inside there? We'll go ahead and hook it back up again. There it goes. It moves to about halfway, which I believe is actually correct. You can see that arm at the top there. You can see if I can move that out of the way a little bit. Now you can see the arm is sitting up there, or that sort of sleeve up at the top. There it goes. Boom. Alright. Okay. Well that looks like it's doing what it's supposed to do, huh? Yeah. That looks good to me. So before I do that, here is the new one that I bought. You can kind of tell it just has a better finish on it, but it's the same part. Let's go ahead and check this one out and see what it looks like when we put the power to it. We can see through that one, it's definitely all the way open. See what we get. It's vibrating, doing the same sort of thing as the other one. The little ticks, tick, tick, tick. It's a little noisier, certainly, but it looks like it's doing the same thing as the other one. It looks like the valve's about halfway closed, which seems about right, and it's just flickering back and forth there. Okay, well that tells me that our part is probably good. Well, let me go ahead and turn off the ignition. We'll look for some other things. Well, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall our known good part. I don't want to throw in another variable of that new part. Pop our connector back on. There we go. That's all back together. All right, well, I think I've made some progress here. I've been fussing and fussing and fussing. I went through the vacuum lines. I just didn't find anything. I checked the connections to the oxygen sensor, the temperature sensor, which we've replaced. I double checked my spark plug wires to make sure they were all hooked up properly. Checked the distributor just to make sure, you know, whatever. I'm just trying to figure this out. And I've quadruple checked our little idle stop switch back here. That can totally cause this issue. But every time I pull this plug on it, the RPMs speed up like they should, and I put it back on, it goes back down, but we're still idling above 1,000 RPM. But remember, on my drives, I also said, you know what, it sounds to me a little like we're missing a cylinder. Well, I think I found it. Hold on, let me get the car started. So that just sounds a little loby, a little like it's missing. So what I was doing was going around and disconnecting each of the fuel injectors looking for a drop to see if I could find one cylinder that wasn't happy. So let me show you. So I've checked the injectors on the left side. They were fine. That would be cylinders 1, 2, and 3. So let's check over here, cylinder 4, 5, and 6. I have to be very, very careful. We've got a lot of rotating bits here and just have to be super careful of that. So okay, let me see if I can pull this. These connectors are a little hard to get off. But let me see if I can pull this one on cylinder number 4. There it goes. Okay, so do you hear the idle drop? It dropped down probably, I don't know, 300 or 400 RPM. I'll plug it back in, and the idle goes back up. All right. What about the next one? There we go. I pulled it off. No RPM change whatsoever. Put it back on, nothing at all. All right, well, that tells me that number 5 is dead. I've also pulled the spark plug out of it. I can do that too. All right, so I'll pull the spark plug wire out. There it is, it's out, nothing. So I can put it back in. There, it's back in. Absolutely no change at all. All right, well, we found at least the issue, or one of the issues. I mean, this may not be the only thing, but it certainly is something. That number 5 there just isn't firing at all. I don't know if it's not got gas or it doesn't getting spark. I don't know. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the spark plug out of it. We'll take a look at that. Maybe the plug's just completely fouled. It'd be weird, but maybe it is. I'll go ahead and pull the spark plug out. I'm just going to think about how to do this. I don't really want to pull the entire fuel reel out and all of that, but if I have to, I have to. Well, our first step's just going to be to pull that spark plug. So let me go ahead and pull that out and see where we are. Now, I'm also kind of breaking a cardinal rule of mine, is not to pull spark plugs out of a hot engine. The heads have expanded and they've clamped down on the spark plug, and so as you pull it out, you have the possibility of galling the threads. But it's going to take hours for this thing to cool down. So I'll just be very careful. It feels like it doesn't want to come out. We'll stop and we'll just do it later. The twisty-turny ratchet here is awesome for this. Let's pull this guy out, see what we got. Yep, there's the spark plug, good. Well, this is what we're looking at here. And it smells wet. I don't know. Shouldn't look like that. It's definitely wet. Well, I'd say that our spark plug there is not very happy for whatever reason. See how wet it is? There's like carbony bits. It looks like it's fouled. See the carbon that's on this side here, on this particular post on this side? Look at that crapola there, huh? I wonder if it's just shorting out. Let's go ahead and clean it and see if we do any better with it. All right, well, I've cleaned the spark plug. It looks quite a bit better. It's going to be cleaner at least. Let's go ahead and throw it in and see if we get any difference. All right, well, I finally got the spark plug back in. You know, when the engine's hot, you just have to be so careful it doesn't cross-thread. If you can't put it in by hand, don't ever force it. And it just took like 100 tries, and I finally just went boom, and went right in. So it's really difficult when the engine is warm. If you have to do it when the engine's warm, just be extremely careful when you put them back in. There we go. All right, make sure that's on. And we did plug in our fuel injector, yes. Yeah, that's plugged in. All right, well, this was step one, so let's give this a try. We have a nice clean spark plug. Let's go ahead and see if this cylinder is actually going to fire. Let's go ahead and pull the injector wire and see if it slows down. That's this guy here. Yeah, no difference. That's it disconnected. That's it connected. No difference. All right, so this is just a process of elimination. Now let's test our wire that we have here. We'll go ahead and start it up again and see if we get sparkage here. Yep, we definitely have sparkage. All right, so that's good. I used my spark plug tester here with a wire from the old harness, and it sure enough, it was flashing just fine in here. So that means that the wiring to the spark plug is fine. We swapped the spark plugs, and actually this won't go unless the spark plug is actually working anyway. So, you know, I don't know. So I'm thinking there's no way it could be electrical at this point. It's got to be that fuel injector is just not happy. I wanted to order a couple of tools that I thought might be helpful. Check this out. Have you ever seen a set of these guys? These are called Noids. That's just what they're called. They're just basically LEDs that you can plug into your wiring harness for each one of the fuel injectors, and if they're getting power, your little Noid here will blink. And that's all really they are. They're not very expensive, but they will tell you if your wiring harness is good all the way up to the injector. So that's probably going to be our next step, is to figure out if we've got electricity to our injector, and we're going to kind of keep boxing it in and move on from there. I'd like to generally talk a little bit about the diagnostic process, and this is a great example because we've got a very specific problem. One cylinder out of 6 isn't working, and we know all the work we've done on the engine. So if you haven't seen all the previous episodes, go ahead and look at those. But what we did was to pull the engine and the transmission out. We did not take the heads off, but we did go ahead and pull the intake manifold off. We pulled lots of bits apart. The whole intake manifold's been completely rebuilt. So we also had to pull the wiring out as well, and that's where I think we might have our issue. The wiring harnesses in these cars over time get kind of brittle and kind of hard, and you can get electrical issues if they get moved a little bit too much. They're just old. They're like 35 years old, so it's just old wiring. I'm kind of hoping that's what our problem is. But let's take a look at what's going on. We have one cylinder out of 6. So what does that tell us about specific versus general issues on the car? Well, you might think, oh, did you replace your temperature sensor and your position sensors? Yes, we replaced all those, but it's not really relevant because that would affect the entire engine. So would the distributor would affect the entire engine, the coil, for instance, those sorts of things. Up here, our fuel metering and all of that is all going to be distributed across the entire engine. So we'd expect all the cylinders to see the effect. We're only seeing an effect on just this one cylinder. So it can't be the fuel rail, for instance. Why? Well, because it's just a square tube is really all it is, and it feeds all 3 injectors, and our forward and rear injectors are working just fine. Well, what else could it be? It could possibly be a spark plug wire, because that's specific to the actual cylinder, but not our rotor. So I think you're kind of getting the idea. Anything that's general, that will affect all the cylinders, is not something we're really going to start with. We're going to go directly to that one problem, go all the way in, check it out. So there's only 3 ways that cylinder could not be firing. Remember, we didn't take the heads off, so I didn't change any of the cam timing either, and the other 2 cylinders on that bank are working great. So there's just 3 possibilities then, right? It would be spark, it would be gas, or it would be compression. Those are really the only possibilities. So we've pulled the spark plug out, we've checked it, cleaned it, and it seems to be functioning just fine. So my next step is going to be to interrogate the fuel injector itself. It's the only thing that's specific to that cylinder on the fuel system. So there's a couple of possibilities. I suppose it could be completely clogged at the top, although we sent all 6 of these injectors out and got them completely clean and flow tested. So chances of the injector itself being back are, that's pretty small, but Okay, possible. What else could happen? It's not going to be a gasket because we'd see fuel leaking all over the place, and the cylinder would be firing, but that's not what's happening. We're getting any firing on that cylinder at all. Now, I suppose it could be a compression issue if, say, some of the carbon broke loose and maybe was holding one of the valves open a little bit, but it can't open too far or the piston will contact it. I think we would also hear that. If it was on the exhaust, you'd hear a chopping noise in the exhaust, and I don't think we really hear that. Same thing for the intake. If it's the intake valve, every time that piston comes up for compression, it would be pushing air backwards into the entire intake system. I don't think we're really seeing that either, but there's ways we can interrogate that as well. We can do a compression test on it. We can put a bore scope down there with a reverse mirror to look back up at the valves. We can check the piston. There'd have to be an awfully huge hole in the piston, or the rings would have to be non-existent for there not to be any compression in that cylinder. Once again, we didn't pull the pistons out. We didn't pull the cylinders out. So all of that is just set. It's exactly the way it was when we started this whole process. I think that's going to be a pretty small possibility. My bet is on electrical issues with these wiring harnesses. That's my best bet. So let's test that fuel injector. We'll throw a Noid on it. We'll see if we've got electrical power to it. And I don't know, we'll have to see. Either it's going to work or it's not. So that's going to be my next step. Our Noid kit here comes with a bunch of these, and the reason is they're for different manufacturers of fuel injectors. The one we're going to be using is the Bosch one. Hopefully the pin spacing is correct, but it's supposed to be for these types of fuel injectors. So, and all we do is we just wiggle our connector off here. There we go. Get that off. Set that guy up there like that. Funny enough, it wasn't the Bosch one that fit, it was the GM one. So that's kind of weird, huh? But it needed to have flat pins, and that's one of the nice things about buying a whole set like that. This is an older car, so maybe the new Bosch injectors have, you know, just straight round pins on them, but this is an older car. So, I don't know, you got a bunch of them to choose from. It looks like the GM one was the one that fit. So, all right, next step is going to be to start the car, and what we're looking for is some blinking on our Noid. All right, well there's our Noid, and look at that, our Noid is blinking. So let me turn this off, I'll just see it a little bit better. There we go. You see the Noid blinking? There we go, that means we are getting power to our injector. Well, I really expected that Noid not to be blinking, but it was, and that means that we're getting power to our injector. You know, I doubt seriously there's anything wrong with the cylinder, but there is another test we can do for our injector, and that is to pop off the fuel rail, pull it out, and swap it with one of the other cylinders. Since we know that the other 5 cylinders are working just fine, we can swap it with a known good injector and see if the problem follows the injector. If it doesn't follow the injector, then it's cylinder related. If it does follow the injector, it's obviously the injector, and we'd have to get back with RC injection and find out why that injector isn't working. One of the first things I need to do before I do any of this work is to depressurize the fuel system. There's a check valve on the pump, so when this system is running, it's running at about 50 psi or so, but that check valve on the pump won't allow the pressure to drop over time. That's so you get back into the car a few days later, you go to start it, and it starts right up. You got plenty of fuel, everything's ready to go, you're even at pressure. That's awesome. There's a takeoff here on the other fuel rail on the left-hand side that I need to loosen up this cap, pull the ball out of it, and drain the fuel. And that way, when we pull our fuel rail on this side, gas won't go everywhere. There'll still be a decent amount of gas in the rail, but at least it won't be under pressure. Well, we're done alleviating the pressure here. Let's go ahead and put our ball back on, which kind of goes on like that, and put our cap on. There we go. And we can snug this back up. All right, there we go. Let's get back to the right side and start dismantling the fuel rail. This is our injector that's giving us grief. I would just say, we can take a look at it. I can't believe that the little filter in the top is completely clogged. We went through these completely. We sent them off to RC fuel injection. They went through them completely. I took a look down in there. There's actually a screen in there, and I just don't see any issues in there. It looks completely clean. I wouldn't expect them to be dirty. They were completely cleaned, flow tested and everything. But all right, let's go ahead and swap it with the other one. This is our known good. This is number 4, cylinder number 4. Looks fine. Everything looks good in there. Don't see anything out of sorts at all. Of course, this one actually is working, so. Okay, our known good unit, we'll put it back in for position number 5 here. Pop that guy in. There we go. Just refit our injector here. Great. Now, as always, working with gas in the engine, I have a fire extinguisher right here. So if anything goes crazy, I'm ready to go. We have our injector swapped, 4 to 5 and 5 to 4. Let's go ahead and start the engine and see if the problem follows. That was to be expected, huh? Since we took all the fuel out. So it took a second for it to fire back up again. No big deal. Let's go ahead and pull our wires on the injectors and see if it follows. Ah, there we go. And the RPM's dropped. This is cylinder number 5. I pulled the plug on. Back on. All right, let's check cylinder number 4. Look at that, no difference. That's it back on. That's it off. That's it back on. We'll double check this again with cylinder number 5. Yeah, see it dropped. Put it back on. And it comes back up. All right. Holy cow, well, I really didn't expect that, but it did. It followed. That means that that injector is not happy. So, all right, well, sounds like we have a bad injector. It seems really strange. I mean, we sent all 6 of them off to get them flow tested. I have data on all 6 of them. All right. Well, I guess I'll pull the fuel rail off, pull that injector back out. I think we're going to end up sending it off to RC injection and see what's going on with it. Well, I think we found at least one of our issues with that injector not working. So because of that, I went ahead, pulled the rail on the other side, pulled all 6 injectors out, put them on the workbench, and tested each one of them. Take a look. Well, after talking to RC Fuel Injection, they asked me to go ahead and pull all 6 of the injectors. So here we are. We've got all 6 of them. I've labeled the one that we're having trouble with. This was originally in cylinder number 5. And they said you can use a simple 9-volt battery and just click these guys to see if the piston's actually moving in here. So simple enough. Get a little click. That's what we want to hear. Now what it's actually doing is moving this small pin here on the end. But it only moves about 3 mils, so it's very difficult to see it move, but you can kind of see it moving. You can see a little fluid coming out too. So, yep, see that guy bouncing back and forth? All right. Well, let's test the one that's giving us grief. See this? Nothing. No click at all. Nothing at all. So this injector is definitely bad. They said you can, if you use something kind of soft, plastic-ish, you don't want to bend that pin. It's steel, but you don't want to bend it. You could push on that pin to try and free it. But for me, we're going to be sending all 6 of these back, and I don't want any chance of messing this thing up. So at any rate, looks like we definitely have one bad one. While we're here, let's go ahead and test the other ones. There's our click. Yep. Okay. And that matches what we saw in the car. We pulled each one of these one at a time, and listened for an RPM drop. And only when we pulled this one did we get no RPM drop. So we got about 50 to 100 RPM drop for every single one of these, except for this one on cylinder number 5. Well, it looks like the other 5 seem to be working-ish. It's a little hard to tell. So we called RC Injectors and asked them what we should do, and they said, oh, by all means, send them back. And they've been working on them, so we boxed them up and sent them off, and they should be back hopefully next week. We can get them back in here, and we can get back into doing the diagnosis on the engine. I think we still have some other issues possibly, but we'll see once we know that's good. I want to go in and test the fuel pressure and a bunch of other things on the car just to make sure we can start knocking things off the list. Well, the problem with the injector is really on us and not RC Injectors. They did tell us when we sent them off the first time that they probably should go right back into the car if possible, and we kind of waited a while. We waited about a year, actually. So that's a little too long, and sometimes those injectors can lock back up again. So that's bad, and that's on us. But they're going to fix them. They're awesome. They're great. So we really love those guys. They've been really, really helpful. All right, well, I'm gonna cut the video off here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you got questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below, and I'll get right to them. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and also subscribe to the channel. If you haven't, hit the little bell next to it to be notified, because you're not gonna wanna miss any of the content on this. We've got a bit more to go on this car. We have the interior to do as well. And then when we're done with that, we're gonna be moving over to the Ferrari. We've got a lot of work to do on that. Suspension work and interior work and stuff, and that's going to be our next project car. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and as always, a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Until next time, safe travels. Bye.